AskReddit by Lestangel 8. What is the scariest disease you know? Rabies. Once the symptoms start, it's too late. Dementia Alzheimer's has to be one of them. Forgetting everything and everyone you know and being constantly confused as what's going on is terrifying. My grandpa has started to show signs, very early stages of it, and you can tell he is aware of it happening, but there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Pancreatic cancer. 9 times out of 10 you get that, you're fucked. My mother just passed away from this. It was painful to watch. Prion disease. Kuru specifically, because until the 1960s, it was regularly being transmitted by funerary cannibalism in a tribe in Papua New Guinea. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and most other prion diseases, are honestly terrifying. Mother died from it in 2016. Like hitting the shittiest lottery known to man, and I'm in therapy for the PTSD her caretaking left me with. Thanks to everyone in this thread for giving me a wealth of new fears. As a hypochondriac I now have ALS, pancreatic cancer and rabies. I am fucked. Huntington's. Everything about it is nightmare fuel. I scrolled until I found this. I was a child caregiver for my mom until she died when I was 21. Now my 2 older sisters have it. One is in a long-term care home with the brain of a 5-year-old. The other is still mobile but just barely. She is constantly choking and falling. She broke her nose last week from a bad fall. They are both early 40s. It's an absolute tragedy for everyone involved. Even me who tested negative. How am I supposed to be happy I get to live and they don't? The hypochondriac in me said not to click into this. I did anyway. Dude. Fucking same. We should know better. Necrotizing fasciitis, flesh-eating disease. That's a scary, fast and painful way to die, and, even with treatment in time, you're scarred or crippled for life. Second this. Within 24 hours my nan went from seeing her doctor about a boil on her sacrum. Was prescribed antibiotics and told to come back 2 days later. That night nan called one of her daughters, and it was picked up that nan seemed delirious. My aunt rushed out there, called an ambulance. As soon as she arrived into hospital, she was in theater within 20 minutes. Was found to be necrotizing fasciitis and sepsis. She coded twice on the table. And by 6 p.m. that night, she took her last breath. Was only 62 at the time, almost 63. Locked-in syndrome. Look up the story of Lacey Ellen Fletcher. Deleted. MNDLs. From diagnosis to death was 8 months, February-October, for my dad. Before that, he had slowly started wasting away. Shortly after diagnosis, he had to have a feeding tube installed, as he couldn't swallow anymore. By June he couldn't talk but he grunted, and we became very talented at guessing what he needed. July, he was walking with a crutch and refusing to use the wheelchair. Late August the morphine didn't really help anymore. September he was getting sick and more tired. October he went into hospital, found out there that he had mycoplasma and a partially collapsed lung. He died a couple of days later. The muscles in his throat were the first to give in, so it became hard for him to swallow food, then it became harder to even get down fluids. When he lost his speech and couldn't even breathe in hard enough to have his 1 cig a day, we knew he was giving up. We saw it in his eyes. Watching my dad waste away not being able to communicate is the most difficult thing I've lived through. Sickle cell anemia. My older sister had it and she died from it. So sorry to hear this. I really hope there will be progress with treatment of this disease. Way back I worked with companies trying to find a cure, but they sadly failed. ALS. Fatal familial insomnia gets my vote. Rabies would beat it, but at least rabies kills you fairly quickly. FFI can take years. I honestly would just want the bye-bye injection if I ever got diagnosed. Ebola kills you in 10 days, 90% fatal, turns your insides to liquid. Also destroys the connective tissue in your face so you're unrecognizable. Supposedly the only reason it never spreads far is because the host dies before mass infection occurs. Only the very first outbreak was 90% fatal. The 2014 outbreak, the biggest by a factor of like 100, was more like 33% fatal. It also absolutely does not destroy connective tissue in the face. I'm not sure where that one came from. The idea of the infection burning out by the host dying before transmission is a little outdated. We actually know now that the virus can still spread between humans post-mortem, and that a lot of transmission occurs during folk funeral practices like family washing the dead body. Dementia. Or ABS. Lesch-Nyhan syndrome. Patients are born with a deficiency in a certain enzyme and that causes an extreme full body itching sensation under the skin, so much so that the patients often scratch their skin beyond bloody and start pulling out tendons and such. They bite their tongues off, fingertips, etc. Used to, when kids were born with it they would sew their hands closed or sew them to their chests, like a mummy, to prevent self-mutilation. Most patients don't survive childhood. I'm trying to recall info from a lecture 20+ years ago, so this post is likely rife with misinformation. Richard Preston, who wrote The Hot Zone, has a chapter in the book Panic in Level 4 about this disease. He interviews 2 full-grown men who managed to survive to adulthood with it. Lots of other fascinating stories in that collection too. Marburg's disease. There's a terrifying true book about it called The Hot Zone. Don't read it. The Hot Zone is one of the only books I've had to put down and walk away from because of how scary it was. Excellent writing, for sure. Negliria fowleri, the brains-eating amoeba. I read some years ago about a girl that got that in a swimming pool. They go up your brain through the nose. Imagine being alive, conscious, and knowing that your brain is being eaten, second by second. There's nothing more scary to me. They pretty much always come from lakes or rivers. Negliria fowleri can't survive in a well-chlorinated swimming pool. I agree it's terrifying, but since this whole post is nightmare fuel, I just want to clarify to most that they will not catch this in a well-maintained pool. Stone man disease. Went to school with a guy who eventually died of this. He still lived a life more full than most of us able-bodied. Huntington's disease. It's like having ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's and schizophrenia all in one hideously ugly disease that kills you slowly over the course of 10-20 years. And, if a parent has it, you have a 50/50 chance of getting it. I've seen it take the lives of too many of my own family members, including my aunt and all 3 of her children. I met this woman in the psych ward that had it. Seemed terrible and she had 5 kids. Fibrodysplasia, or stone man's disease, is something straight from a classic horror novel. Your body heals itself by repairing damage with bone. Your muscles and connective tissue will slowly turn to bone over the course of your lifetime, rendering you immobile. It's the only disease where one organ system can turn into another. You can look up the skeletons of people who suffered from it. It's textbook body horror. They have to choose what posture to eventually become locked into. Necrotizing fasciitis. Took my nan's life within 24 hours. Marburg virus. Scleroderma. Your connective tissue basically just hardens into stone. Most of your body, including your skin, is connective tissue, so it can gradually fuck up most of your body, outside and in, distorting it painfully. If it doesn't kill your heart or kidneys, you can suffer from it for a really long time before you succumb.